Hello students, let us learn General Science for class 7 from the book Science Square. Today we are going to learn chapter Reproduction in Plants. In this chapter we shall discuss about various mode of reproduction taking place in plants, different methods involved in vegetative propagation, pollination and its types, fertilization, seed and fruit formation. Let us begin the chapter. The production of new individuals from their parents is known as reproduction. But how do plants reproduce? Most plants will have roots, stems and leaves. These parts are called vegetative parts of a plant. After a certain period of growth, most of the plants will bear flowers. Flowers will perform the function of reproduction in plants. So, we'll say that flowers are the reproductive parts. What are the different types of reproduction? We have already heard about sexual reproduction. In this method, new plants are obtained from seeds. Asexual reproduction. In this method, plants can give rise to new plants without the formation of seeds. The last is a vegetative reproduction. It is also a type of asexual reproduction, but here the new plants are produced from the roots, stems, leaves and buds. As discussed already, these are vegetative parts of the plant and hence it is called vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation by roots. Plants that have tuberous roots have the ability to store food in plants. In order to grow new plants, these tuberous roots are sown in the soil. These are, there you can see the buds present on the fruits that grow above the ground and a new plant is formed. It might be a fruit or a vegetable. You can see vegetative propagation by roots in sweet potato. The swollen root is known as tuber. We'll call it as a tuber, and the buds which you see can develop into a new plant. Another example is dahlia. Let us see the vegetative propagation by stem. Stem tubers. Just like tuberous roots, there are some plants will have tuberous stem. These stem tubers will store the nutrients and bear nodes. These nodes bear buds which form new plants. This is known as potato. You can see this in a potato. Vegetative propagation by stem takes place in potato. You can see the eye of the potato, which is a bud that develops into a new plant. Another vegetative propagation by stem is the runners. You know the runners are the plants that grow along the ground. That is, the stem can be modified as the runners. These runners will contain the buds that can have the ability to produce roots and the stems. You can see these in strawberries. Vegetative propagation by stem. Cutting. It is a method in which a cutting from a plant is taken and is planted in the another pot. This cutting is a part of the stem or might be the branch of the stem. You can do this in the roses. Cutting the top plant and planting it on the another pot. The nodes will help the plant to grow further. Another method is the grafting. Sometimes two plants are joined together so that the new one which can be formed will be having the desired characteristics to the new plant. One plant remains rooted in the ground. That is called as a stalk, which provides the essential nutrients and water. The other one is still attached to it, but in another way. It's called scion. A new plant develops from the graft part. Vegetative propagation by leaves. Some plants have leaves that contain buds so that they develop into a new plant. Example, Bryophyllum. You can see the buds in the margin that produces into a new plant. Let us see what are the advantages of vegetative propagation. The plants that are produced with the vegetative propagation will grow faster than the one which is produced with the sexual reproduction. The plants that reproduce with the vegetative reproduction will have fruits and flowers ahead of the time. The plants that are produced will have exactly the same characteristics as that of the parents. Let us now discuss about the second mode of reproduction, that is asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction takes place by budding. We know that yeast is a single-celled organism. It can propagate every few hours, that is, it can divide every few hours if you provide it with a proper amount of the nutrients. It develops a small bulb-like projection called bud. The buds grow gradually and then gets detached from the parent yeast. This new cell then grows and produces more cells. Sometimes a chain of buds is also formed. This results in the production of more number of yeast altogether. This is asexual reproduction by budding. Let us see how asexual reproduction takes place by fragmentation. We know that algae like Spirogyra reproduce by the process of fragmentation. In this method, when the algae finds enough water and nutrients, we call this as a favorable conditions. The fragments, it begins to fragment and grow into a new individuals. Fragment means just breaking down. That's it. It's just breaks into two individuals. This process continues and algae multiply quickly in a short period of time. Let us see how asexual reproduction takes place by spore formation. Fungi on a bread piece grow from spores which are present in the air. When spores are released, they keep floating in the air. Spores are asexual reproductive bodies. Each spore is covered by a hard protective coat to withstand the unfavorable conditions, such as high temperature and low humidity, so they can survive for a long time. Under favorable conditions, as I said earlier, with sufficient water and nutrients, a spore germinates and develops into a new individual. You can see this in moss and ferns. This is a fern. You can see small spores. This plant is a fern plant. We'll call this as a sorey. Sexual reproduction in plants. The flowers are the reproductive organs in the plant, which we have already discussed. The male reproductive part of the plant is called stamen. The female reproductive part of the plant is a pistil. Some flowers contain both stamen and pistil. Pistil can also be called as carpel. When both the stamens and carpels are found in the same flower, we call it as a bisexual flowers. Lily, rose, brinjal, hibiscus, petunia, and mustard are bisexual flowers, plants. Some flowers contain either stamen or carpel. Any one is present, we'll call it as a unisexual flowers. Example, papaya, watermelon, cucumber, coconut. Anther contains pollen grains which produce male gametes. You can see the stamens is divided into anther and filaments. Stamen consists of anther and filaments. The anther will have the pollen grains, which is a male gametes. A pistil contains stigma, style, ovary. Ovary contains one or more ovules. So stamen contains anther and filament. Pistil contains stigma, style and ovary. Ovary contains ovules. Anther contains pollen grains. The female gamete are the egg which is formed in the ovule. In sexual reproduction, a male and the female gamete fuse to form a zygote. Then pollination takes place. What is meaning of pollination? The pollen grains have a tough protective coat which prevents them from drying up. They can be carried by wind or water because they are lightweight. Insects visit the flowers, carry away the pollen on their bodies. The transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of a flower, that is, transferring pollen into a stigma, we'll call it as a pollination. But pollination may take place in two types. In one, if the pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant, we'll call it as a self-pollination. When the pollen of a flower lands on the stigma of the flower of a different plant but are of same kind, we'll call it as a cross-pollination. Fertilization. The cell which results after fusion of gametes, we'll call it as a zygote. The process of fusion of male and the female gametes is called fertilization. When the pollen grains reaches the stigma, it begins to germinate. It forms a pollen tube. The pollen grains reaches the egg and fuses with the egg to form the zygote. Pollen grain after germinating only will form the pollen tube so that it can reach the egg. The zygote develops into an embryo. Formation of fruit and seed. After fertilization, the ovary grows into a fruit. Other parts of the flower will fall off. The fruit is a ripened ovary. The seeds develop from the ovules. The seed contains an embryo enclosed in a protective seed coat. Some fruits are fleshy and juicy, such as apple, mango, and orange. Some fruits are hard, like almonds and walnuts. Seed dispersal. The transportation of seeds to different places is called seed dispersal. This allows growth of same kind of plants in different regions. Minimizes the competition for food, sunlight, water and other minerals among the plants of the same kind in the same area. So we can see seed dispersal may take place even in different habitat, which is advantageous to the plant. Seeds and the fruits of the plants are carried away by wind, water and animals. Winged seeds, it is carried by the winds. The plants are drumstick and maple. Lightweight seed of grass and hairy fruit of sunflower are carried by the wind. Spongy outer coat water takes place in the water in the coconut. Spiny seeds with hooks are carried away by animals in plants like xanthium and urena. Sometimes fruit also burst. It is seen in castor and balsam. All the seeds are liberated just like that. After the fruit burst, seeds are splashed everywhere. Let us have a chapter recap. There are several methods of asexual reproduction: fragmentation, budding, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. In vegetative propagation, the new plants are produced from different vegetative parts such as leaves, stems, and roots. Flower is a reproductive part of the plant. It has both male and the female gametes. Pollination is a process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of the same or another flower. Pollination is of two types, namely self-pollination and cross-pollination. Pollination takes place in plants with the help of wind, water, and insects. Sexual reproduction involves the fusion of male and the female gametes by fertilization, and which results in the zygote. Zygote develops into an embryo. Fruit is a matured ovary, whereas ovule develops into a seed, which contains the developing embryo. Seed dispersal is aided by wind, water, and animals.